Alright, and we're live. So hey everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm going to go ahead and switch Dana and Neon's webcams because Neon's still working on getting his webcam set up, so sorry for that. Anyways, so most of you guys know who Dana and Michael are, but Michael, you want to give a little overview of what you do with the Coalition? I guess you haven't been on before, so a lot of people might not know who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Michael Shannon. I've been a level designer at the Coalition for about 5-ish years now, and I'd say about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I was brought on as the PvE design lead, so kind of taking care of Horde and Escape.
Okay. So are you still doing any map stuff, or is it like purely okay? So
Yeah,
you're still doing that.
I'm still doing some map stuff. I got an awesome map coming out pretty soon, so nice. Definitely got both my feet in both of the pools there a little bit.
And by soon you mean not Operation 4.
Yeah, we were like, he's not busy enough, so let's give him more stuff.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Well, like you said, you're a PvE guy, and there's a lot of people who want to talk about PvE, so that's why we tried to get you guys both on the stream. And there's a ton of PvE questions that fans have submitted, and a lot that came up in the discussion that we had on this stream last week. So I guess we'll go ahead and hop into some stuff. So first of all,
really quickly before we start, just to kind of for context, like I know a lot of the questions there might be some questions like, why did you guys do it this way? Could you explain sort of like the thoughts around like something like different things that we did for PvE? I might not have perfect answers to all of them because a lot of the people that made those decisions and did that work aren't here to represent those thoughts, and so I can try to give my best answer, but just to give context, like I joined this role about 4 or 5 months ago. Like there's a lot of stuff that, especially in the launch version of the game, that I might not be able to give perfect context to, but I'll try my best.
Okay. Let's see. So the original note I had in here was Tuesday's update missed some Horde stuff, but I guess you guys explained that last night, that some of those updates weren't able to make it into this recent title update.
Yeah, for the PvE part, it was actually the entire update didn't go. There was unfortunately some last-minute localization issues that we caught, so we weren't able to push the patch out, unfortunately.
Okay. So that's something that's going to require a new title update? Then it's not something you guys can do server-side. It's going to have to wait till the next actual title update?
There are parts of it that we could potentially do server-side, but we're just taking a look at we're gonna kind of step back a bit and just kind of reassess how we're going to put that patch out.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll update with timing for that when kind of we know more, because there's some uncertainty around server side versus client side. We don't want to. That's why in What's Up we were just like, we'll let you know. Mostly just because we don't want to overpromise. Like it was unfortunate that it kind of the Loke issue kind of caught us a little bit by surprise. So it's unfortunate it didn't go out, but on the plus side, as I mentioned yesterday, those Marcus enthusiasts can continue to enjoy him for a little bit longer.
So I guess we'll start off with Horde mode, which I know there's a ton of Horde fans out there, and we have these different versions from all the different games. Being that you guys are doing what you're doing with Gears 5 Horde, the company or studio probably has the mindset of this is the best version of Horde for the player base, like to cover all the different types of players. But for you personally, I guess I'll ask that to all three of you because Neon wasn't on last week. What is this your favorite version of Horde, or what has been your personal favorite? So Neon, we'll start with you, and then we can go to Dana and Michael on this.
All right, you can hear me okay now?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. So this is definitely my favorite version. Gears 2 classic variant I definitely enjoy, but didn't like the way that it was back in the day. There's a lot more intuitive measures that you have to do. and I like the class-based system the way it is personally, which I've mentioned that on previous other panels that we've had. I did enjoy 3 with all the customization that you had with like having the silverback and like going crazy with it, but it was a good intro to where we are now. 4, that was not for me, but 5 is definitely where it's at. I am a little concerned though, and I don't know what's going to come, but I do hope that we get the clarity eventually on the delinking, because that's my biggest fear. So once we get that, I'll be more comfortable. But right now, it's definitely this version.
Yeah. So, Dana, I guess, would you say this is your favorite version of Horde, or do you prefer?
Yeah. No, I like this one. I'm not gonna. I dabbled with some Horde in Gears 2, and I didn't really play it much in Gears 3. I enjoyed it, Gears 2 Horde, as a hangout more than anything. Like I wanted to play games with friends, and we didn't. Like I find when I'm playing PvP, especially in Gears, like my ability to speak and play at the same time diminishes. Whereas I feel like with Horde, it's a little bit more of a chill thing. And I think actually Neon, you and my sort of I kind of echo your sense. I didn't dislike Gears 4. I thought it was fine. I enjoyed the PvP in Gears 4 a lot more than I enjoyed the PvE side of it all. But I really like the Horde. I like the freedom to go. So I play a lot of like Apex is one of my favorite games. So I like the idea that I can go, and if I want to play a different way, that the classes really free me up to go. And there's a very distinct, if I'm playing a support role or if I'm playing this role or that role or whatever it is. Like playing Jack is so different versus other stuff, and it's kind of fun. And I feel the way that the class-based system in Gears 5 is really sets up teamwork in a really fun way. So I feel like in other ones that I've played, it feels like people just kind of went off and did their own kind of thing, and you kind of worked together, you kind of didn't. Whereas a lot of and I think some of the great work that was started by, Ryan and Seb, and then has been carried on with Michael, that like leading into the teamwork and how the classes work together, and how there are complementary abilities, and I like the perks. Just all of those things just make it feel like just a more feature-rich mode for me. So that's my 2 cents.
So yeah, for me, it's interesting because it's difficult to give an answer, given that I'm so close to the project.
Right.
For me, like Gears 5, obviously the ultimates bring a lot to the game. The Fabricator, I know it was in Gears 4, but like the concept of sort of bringing your Fabricator to anywhere you want, building a base, and having the freedom to do that is obviously like really awesome. I found Gears 2 was like a super chill experience. Like I loved how relaxed it was. Like you could just spawn in, go grab a long shot, go grab a bull talk, just like play it however you want. There was no like pressure to play a certain meta or to play your class a certain way.
Yeah.
It was just like super relaxed. You just do whatever you want and just have fun, right? So that's one of the reasons why I really like Gears 2. I was a little less thrilled about Gears 3. I found that sort of the way it forced you to build your base in certain locations was a little bit of a thing I wasn't a huge fan of. And I found the silverback meta was kind of like the fact that you could just have it for the entire time, and you could just like hide it kind of in the back and just sort of like not take damage and just sort of just mow everything down, made it a little boring for me personally. But overall, like Gears 3's strength was the enemies. It had pretty top tier enemy variety that I think a lot of people talk about quite a bit. So for me, that's what sort of elevated Gears 3 quite a bit. And obviously, like, they were the first ones to kind of dabble in fortifications. So that was a huge step forward for Horde. But that's kind of my thoughts. I know I didn't really talk about one that was my favorite. I kind of enjoy them all, right? But, I do play Gears 5 quite a bit, and I have fun with it. So
yeah. So you mentioned fortification.
I've never heard anybody ask for different enemies before. It's interesting you said that, Michael.
Well, I want to add to that, though. I want to add to what you were saying, Michael, because you make a good point. In the other games, you're kind of forced to play a certain way, but In this way, at the launch of Gears 5, you were kind of forced to play a certain way. It was bleeding enemies with JD, or for example.
Yeah,
But
even a
now
little bit now.
with what's happening, yeah, with Operation 4, now you have the perks and being able to use Lonnie, and on certain maps, you know, you can go in and just start knifing everybody using an electro blade, and you have bleed going all over. That's actually kind of cool that you're bringing in these RPG elements into the game to make it more of a, I do this, what's the consequence or what's the reward, which is actually nice. You want to have that balance.
Yeah, like that's the goal. Like for me, the biggest thing is I want people to feel like they don't, if they want to engage in a certain tactic for fun, like they're like, oh, I love just shooting my Lancer. I love just, you know, meleeing enemies. I don't want them to feel like this dread in the back of their mind where they're just like, you know, this is fun, but I know I'm not, you know, maximizing my potential, right? And if the game isn't balanced properly, then you have that, and then you sort of have what you see sometimes when the game isn't balanced, where people are arguing about certain things like being too powerful, too weak, and they're like, well, if you don't like it, make your own lobby. And for me, that stuff's super toxic. I don't like that. I want people to just have a relaxed experience where they can just play their way and just have fun, right? So for me, that's one of the main goals when we're balancing the game, and I hope we can get to a place where everyone can feel like they can just play the way they want to play, and they don't have to feel like they're, you know, betraying some meta or not playing optimally.
How do you balance that? Because I feel like there's some play styles that maybe they're too weak or they're too powerful, and you have to bring something up or bring something down in order to make it so that almost everything sort of feels equal and nothing really stands out as the perfect way to play.
It's not easy, because you bring up a really good point, right? Like you want, like the ideal place to be is that everyone feels a little overpowered, but it's balanced. That's kind of where Overwatch is successful, like in games like that, where they kind of make everyone feel like they're amazing at the thing they do, but the balance between all of them is pretty good. So then you don't have one that's just like so much better than the others, and that's sort of one of the main things that we look for when we're balancing, is we want to make sure that like the core gameplay there and like what makes that character fun, you know, never goes away. That's always there, but sometimes we do have to make changes where, you know, we have to bring some things up, some things down. Our intention isn't to take a character and make them useless or kind of remove what's fun. It's to kind of keep what's fun there, but make sure that when people play, you know, when you pick a class, you know, everyone on that team has an equal opportunity to contribute to the victory, right? That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Let's see. So you mentioned enemy variety as something that people want. Obviously, you guys have limitations about you. It's going to take a lot of work to generate new AI and bring new enemies to the game and stuff. But is there anything that you can do, or is there anything that you're working on now in order to increase that variety?
Yeah, so obviously we can't, like, you know, go into explicit detail about what we're doing, but we do know that there's a hunger for enemy variety in the game, and you know there are some low hanging fruit that we can do. Like last time on the dev stream, we kind of talked about like, hey, like, you know, what if we, you know, made some new drones and give them different guns, and like there are some, you know, some things we can do to help it. Obviously, like I can't talk about what we're doing, but we do know that people are looking for that, and we're going to try to see what we can do.
Okay.
I'm not giving up on asking for ROM with the Krill attack.
I know. I think ROM is sort of that go-to boss that whenever boss waves are brought up, people are like, why don't we have ROM? That would be such a cool boss.
Yeah, that's mine. That's like my go-to. And it's funny because I hadn't really thought about it, and then I played Gears 1, and with that end fight scene, and I even talked to Michael Shannon about this. I was playing co-op with my kid, and I was like, I want this in Horde. Like, it's like, so I think it's been my go-to of what I want to see.
Yeah. And this is something I don't know if you can hit on any of these, but I'm just wondering if in development, if there were any particular classes, ultimates, or even fortifications that were deemed like too OP or just not fun enough and ended up getting scrapped from the game.
Oh, like cut content?
Yeah.
Is it cool to talk about cut content, Dana? Like stuff that just didn't go out?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think that's fine.
Okay, yeah. So we did a few things. We had like a sentry that you could put guns on. So it was like a socket sentry. You could kind of like, you know, You could put like a Lancer on it. You could and there's like different slots on it, so you could like mix and match. Wasn't
that like the
on
concept?
paper.
Wasn't that the concept of like the original Gears 3 Horde thing? Was you could put your different weapons on the turret. It was a manned turret, not a sentry. But I think it was.
Well, I think like the actual like turret in Gears 3 is a big turret with like 4 retro lancers attached to it. If you look at it,
yeah, I think the original concept was each of those 4 slots you could put a weapon.
Yeah,
in.
But I think they just baked it in and they just made it so it was like whatever. But it didn't look quite like that. It was more like the sentry gun that we have in the game right now, but it sort of had like little slots on it, and it sounded amazing. Like, you know, you can make like a shotgun turret, you can make like a whatever, but it kind of was a burden because, you know, you had to spawn it. Well, then you had to go find guns for it. Then now you have no gun because you just put your gun on the turret. Now you're getting shot. Now you're like fumbling around the ground trying to find more guns to put on this turret. And then, you know, was it really worth it? You know, because you could just have put like a level 4 sentry down, right? So it was a bit of there was some problems we ran into around making it feel like impactful for all the effort it took to kind of like, you know, put all the weapons on it and stuff. It was a really cool idea. You know, I'd love to see if we could pull it off in the future, but that was one. We had an ice turret. So we had like, this was actually Dell's original ultimate. It was actually like a mounted turret he put on the ground and it shot like ice bullets. But I think I'm not really sure what the reason was we cut that. I think it was, we were running into problems around players not understanding that they weren't doing damage, but they were doing damage.
Yeah.
So that was one. There's a whole
Equally
bunch.
important, though.
Sorry?
Mm-hmm. I was saying that's equally important, though. You know, having something that's freezing enemies makes your life a lot easier, especially in Horde.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it was pretty powerful ability. And I think in the future we're going to try to see if we can bring some sort of turret in. I don't know if it'll be an ice turret, but I'd love to see if we can bring the turret back in some way.
But go ahead and add that one and get rid of the trackers.
Yeah, I don't think anyone likes the trackers. They're just kind of a sad time.
Have you guys had a mobile cover?
A mobile cover.
Or deployable cover type?
Yeah,
thing?
like I've heard that idea a lot. It's really cool, especially for Gears of War, right? Because like cover is like the main thing, right? I would love this to try it. The problem is the cover markup system makes it a little complicated. Like you even see like bugs with the way the fabricator has cover nodes on it. That sometimes it's definitely something that we could do. It'd be a little tricky to kind of make it feel good. Like for example, if you put it up to a wall, like, you know, does the cover merge with the cover nodes from the actual level and like let you sort of walk along the wall? Like we would want to ask ourselves that question. But I think it's a really cool idea. I would love to do it.
Yeah. Let's see. My notes got deleted right before the stream, so.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I'm trying to go through my old version of my notes.
Well, while you're doing that, I do think I would like to actually like maybe to touch on a little bit what Michael was saying about the like concept through the notion of testing, and not just for PvE necessarily, but there's lots of times where people have come up with really great ideas that we've all been like, this is going to be amazing. And you go and on paper, it just sounds like, haven't we done this before? Why hasn't this been done before? And then you get it into the game and it just never really clicks for whatever reason. I mean, I think, you know, on the skiff, and we've talked about this before, this is campaign, but like we tried to do combat on the skiff and we just could never really make it work. Right. And I think there's lots of things where, you know, it's part of that iterative exploratory design process that I think is, you know, people don't get to see a lot of, unfortunately, because it usually you see the result of what worked, not the result of what didn't. But it's kind of, if anybody that gets into the world of game, like, you know, and into making of games, it's kind of the really fun part is that trial and error process and all of the play testing and all of that goes into it. I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, so speaking of something that you guys may have tested and may have not worked well, I'm wondering if you guys ever tried out Judgment had like these sorry, there's a beeping noise. Sorry, Judgment had like the sniper perches, for example. And I'm wondering if you guys ever looked at having something like that in this game where certain classes can reach certain areas of the map that other classes can't.
Sorry, I think there's a fire alarm going off in my building. So I think it's going to have to be the Dana show for about 5 minutes while I figure out what's going on.
Okay. Sorry, what did you ask there on that one? I'll see if I can answer it helpfully.
So in Gears Judgment, there were sniper perches were one of the things where only the sniper class was able to climb up there, and it gave them an advantage because they're up high and they can look down on the map. And I wasn't sure if the team had tested anything along those lines, like maybe there's some small areas that only like a scout can get in and navigate in close quarters, or the sniper can climb up in certain areas.
I can't speak to that, unfortunately. Sorry, because that's obviously very specific. But I do like the idea. I mean, it's interesting because I'm going to hypothesize for a second, and Michael can confirm or deny when he gets back. But I feel like by having the class-based system, you're already giving those unique moments to the various classes that to go and to create a secondary environmental thing, especially if you were to go and throw Marcus or like, you know what I mean? Like there's certain things inside of that where you could go and you could really make something overpowered, where you go and you get Foz in there. Like you could stack your ultimates, and all of a sudden, like if that person is really protected in that, then it becomes a bit of a nuance. So that would be my 2 cents on that one. That I feel like the class system mitigates the need to have environmental like exclusive perks for per class.
So
that's my 2 cents. I mean, I'm not the designer here, but that would be my perception.
What would your thoughts be for you? What would your thoughts be if you were to say like have a particular section? We'll just make this easy. We'll think escape for a second, but this could obviously relate to Horde.
Yeah.
Is that you're on the helipad? This has been brought up, but then you have these features for the perch, or you have like a cone shape saying like, okay, you can't go across this. If you go across this, you're out of bounds. Your character will take like a reduction in health. It'll start dying, kind of like Halo. If you go out of bounds, or Call of Duty, you'll start getting these like alerts like, oh, you're out of bounds. But then you're planted to defend a particular area, and they're just like swarming you. It's like almost like escape, but reversed, but for Horde. Instead, like you're just patrolling a certain area the whole time. But then you have features like that will be beneficial because you're locked into this small area of or radius to not move from. I guess that would be the way to word that.
Yeah, I mean, I do like that end fight and escape where you are sort of like it's your last stand, and it's. I mean, I really like that part of escape in general because I feel like escape is such a like attack mode, and then you end with this sort of like, okay, now you got to defend, and it always feels a little frantic because, like you might have had a weapon that was working at the beginning, like that on the attacking way, and then all of a sudden now you're in this defend mode, and you're like, why do I still have this long shot? This isn't the weapon I need right now. So I like that idea of that. Now, as it relates to Horde, no. I mean, for me, the thing that I like the way that we've sort of done Horde for Gears 5 is the fluidity of the environment. Obviously, you want to go and hunker down and have your base and so on and so forth. What we've done, where encouraging people to venture out and to move outside of that. I don't know if we would want to punish someone for leaving an area. And I'm just gonna like brainstorm design so Michael Shannon can cringe at this point. But it would almost be, and I don't know how you would communicate this, but it could be an interesting dynamic to a boss fight or something where it wouldn't be like you go to every mode, like it wouldn't be like this is your zone for all X number, all 50 ways if you're doing classic Horde. But if it was something like you're fighting Matriarch, this might be a really bad comparison because of how dynamic she is, but like from a movement standpoint. But if you were going and you really needed to hunker down and you were kind of in there, and it would add a complexity to that. I don't know how you could change the world to make that happen, but it's a neat idea.
So
I don't know if I answered your question effectively, but
so just go back.
No.
halfway of that question. Were you talking about sort of like restricting the way the places the player can go to kind of force a defensive moment?
Yeah, it's sort of
Yes.
like a survival
Yeah.
in Judgment.
Yeah. So we've tried this a whole bunch of times. It's really hard to do because the players sort of rebel against it whenever they can. Like, for example, the Horde map Overload, we tried to do that, but what happens is everyone kind of hunkers down in one of the corners instead of playing in the middle. When we were playtesting it, we played in the middle and we're like, oh my god, this is so much fun! Like they're coming from everywhere and it's like amazing. And then like everyone just like goes in the corner, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of convinced that the way to do it, you would literally have to just like damage players when they leave a zone. Like you'd have to make like sort of
That's what I was referring.
yeah.
That's what I was referring to. Is like to put some type of parameter where it's like in Halo or Call of Duty, where if you were to go out of bounds, that's what I'll call it. Then your character gets a warning. It says "Return to battlefield," and that's kind of what I was
I
hinting
think it's
at.
a really cool idea because I've been very interested in making a moment like that. Like that classic fight from Gears 1 in Embry Square where you're in the there's like a fountain and then you like e-holes start coming up all around you, and like that kind of moment is awesome. I love that kind of thing. But that if you took that little section and put it in Horde, people would find some corner somewhere and sit in it, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough to make it
Yep.
work. So I'd be super interested in maybe having that like as a mutator or something. It's like a mutator you turn on and like it like just forces you to play in one spot. The thing though is like some players get a little they don't like being forced to play in a very particular way, so it's a little dicey, but I think like it could be interesting as like an option.
Yep. What is there an option or a potential chance to where? And of course, this is going to come with some technical stuff, so it's beyond my head. But maybe you can give some insight if it's even remotely possible in Gears 5 or even potentially in the future, where let's say you're doing just a normal Horde, or you could even be Horde Frenzy, I guess, and you're going waves 1 to 10, and then on wave 9 you get to the boss fight on wave 10, and then it's like a completely different like environment or zone. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Diablo and how those games work, but then you go into a dungeon and you're in a different area, a different environment, but you're still in the same zone, I guess. Is that something that you could possibly do where like they get their own little entry area or boss area? Changes it up a little bit.
The way that I could see us doing that with what we have today is expanding a map. So like say you have like a tiled board map and like a door opens on a certain wave, we actually can do that with what we have today. What's a little trickier is if you actually want to like morph the level around the player while they're actually playing. There's a reason why in Allfather's Arena we do the swap when you can't play, because we can't. And a lot of people asked when that map came out, like, hey, like, why don't you have it so in Horde like it changes like all the time? And the reason is because we can't have players like standing where stuff's changing, because then that just you can't. It just kind of messes. You're going to be on top of cover. You're going to go under the map. Like there's all sorts of.
And that's because of the cover-based system.
Well, it's not even that. It's just like if the map's like, how do you change the map when the player is standing on top of it? Like, do you just fade everything away? Do you just snap your fingers and it changes? Like, what if they're standing where something's going to appear? Like, there's so many problems that kind of come up when you do that. I'm sure like there's probably clever ways we could do it. But they're all expensive solutions, right? Yeah. So I think what could be really neat is sort of an overrun style, maybe like a Horde on tile map where say the doors are opening and it kind of like pushes you forward or pushes you backwards. I think that could be really neat. But when it comes to like actually like morphing the map around you, it's a little tricky.
I'm going to ask a question for Michael, mostly because I want to know. Was there ever thought of a hybrid escape Horde? So like you go and you hunker down, like thinking of what you just said, and you go and you have the venom kick in, that then sort of like instead of like it's always you hunkering, it's kind of still the defend aspect of Horde, but you go and you throw venom at somebody so that you're having to be more dynamic and adaptable in picking the cover you want. Like maybe it forces you into a moment where you're having to build a base or take your like for X number of waves. in an environment, like in a non-ideal environment. Like it's like, you know, when you play Tetris, it's really fast, it's easy at the beginning, and as it gets faster, you start throwing things down not where you want them, but just because you have to. Like that's kind of, I can't think of a better analogy,
Yeah,
but that's
I'm picturing
sort
like
of what
the
I was
venom pushing you back through an escape hive, and you have to try and beat all 50 waves before the venom like completely pushes you out or something. That'd be pretty interesting.
I think we could potentially look at doing that like in a Horde on tile map style.
Yeah.
We've been very interested in doing that. Like you've seen little bits of us like experimenting with it, like, you know, with the choke where you have that bridge, you have to pull the lever, and then it doesn't open for like 30 seconds, so you just have to turn around and kind of, you know, fight off enemies that are just flying at you, but while this bridge is sort of slowly kind of rising. That was us kind of playing with the idea of a Horde moment. I don't know if it pops quite as much as it should. You could see sort of us playing with that in the Last Stand. That was a hive that I made, and I don't know how successful I was because people just play that by they just run past all the enemies. They just sort of like.
I mean, and those moments always feel like Gears campaign Horde light moments, right? Where you're waiting for door to open, or and you always know what's happening. It's like, oh, hold on, the door's gonna open, and you're like, okay, here we go, and you're ready to go and repel all enemies.
You have to be that blunt to actually make it work. Like you have to actually prevent the player from going to make it work, because then you get what I have in the Last Stand, which is like, oh well, I'll just play Clayton, and then when there's like a bunch of enemies, I'll just hit my ultimate and then just run past, right? So that's actually one of like the main challenges of being a game designer, is you're kind of fighting the players, because the players are always going to try to find the most efficient way to win, and like that's fine, like that's totally fine, like that's them playing the game well. They're finding an efficient way to win. But if you're trying to craft a very specific experience that kind of gives a certain vibe, like you have to sometimes be very blunt about what you do to the player to force them into a certain situation that really, you know, makes them a bit uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've mentioned the tile-based Horde maps a few times, and those are really cool. I really like Overload. But how different is it designing, or like when you're designing a traditional map, you have to design it so it works in Horde and it works in PvP. So like how much more freedom do you have, or what kind of things can you look at now that you aren't limited by, oh, this needs to also work in PvP, this is a specifically Horde thing?
Well, what's really cool about the tile maps is, you know, like you said, like all we have to worry about is Horde. So we can make, you know, crazy choke points we would never dream of making in a PvP map, or like, you know, a really, really tiny map that would just never work as a 5v5. So in that way we have more freedom, but obviously we're working with tiles, so we only have so much surface area that we can work with until we've kind of run out of, you know, tiles we can use. So we really like playing around with the tile maps. Obviously, like they're, you know, we get less freedom with them, but at a trade-off of they're a lot easier to make. We're using tiles we already have, right? So with the exception of like some small dynamic elements like doors opening and closing and stuff like that, like they're pretty simple to make. But I don't know if we should just keep sort of, you know, pumping them out like a factory, because people might start to sort of feel like, oh well, you know these are cool, but like, you know, maybe there's too much, maybe cheapens like, you know, the value of each. So
well, and I know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, when we want to make sure that when we put one out, like it's awesome. Like, that we don't just sort of like, you know, pump out a whole bunch. It's like, yeah, let's fight in this tile now. Let's fight in this tile. Like, I think if we do any more, like, we're gonna make sure that when one comes out, like people really see the value and they see the idea and they're like, okay, that's cool.
Well, and I'm going to speak to Free for All a little bit here with how we did them previously on the tile-based maps. And Michael, you can jump in because you can speak more eloquently than I can around sort of the limitations of the tile. Is we found that we ended up creating the same type of experiences over and over again as you put the pieces together, and you're like, oh, we're ending up, and this is sort of the natural flow or whatever it is. So now Horde is obviously a lot different because you're not flowing through the map the way that you would be in a free for all. But it becomes the same thing, I think, just sort of to build on what you were saying earlier, Michael, of like, you want to go and make sure that if you're doing something, it feels unique, it feels fresh, it feels different.
Yeah, no, well, making the free-for-all maps was actually quite challenging because when you use like a medium to large size tile, like you've shot your shot. Like that's like you've used that tile, you can never use it again on a free-for-all map, or else people are just gonna, they're gonna basically see them as the same map. So when we were making the free-for-all maps, we were like, okay, like we're gonna use this tile and we have to pull it off. Like we have to make this map work. Because we can't take those tiles and like just keep reusing them in new free-for-all maps, or otherwise like you're going to just dilute everything, right? So I did the free-for-all map core and a little bit of the pit, and it was really challenging working with all of the other designers to make sure that we weren't kind of like, overlapping in our designs, and like make sure that, okay, we have only these tiles to work with. We have to make sure that each one of them fits a certain role, has a very certain like fresh feel, and they're not like overlapping ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I personally enjoy what has been done with the 3 maps for Operation 4. I mean, having them has been a change of pace. You're not playing the same maps. You're not doing the same thing. They're unique experiences, even though it's Horde and it's not free for all. I do enjoy the fact that that's happened. And the last time that you were on stream on the Gears of War stream, I actually asked the question, and I think it would be beneficial to refresh it because now we're very centric. We have a more of a direct line of communication, so maybe I can get this point across just as clear, if not clearer. But just as a refresher, with the map builder, again, I'm not trying to force an answer here, but let's just assume it does come out at some point. You mentioned that there would be control issues. And what I mean by that is that if I was to build a map and say, spawn enemies here, blah, 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 that they may not interact with the environment properly. Is there any indication or any way that is actually going to happen so that way they all can spend more time on actually developing other style maps, whereas the community can do something like Forge where they just play within the environment and figure it out themselves and say, okay, this works or doesn't work? Is there any way that can be adjusted or done? Assuming Map Builder does come out at some point, I'm not sure when and if.
There's a lot to unpack with that question. Like just to kind of start, we've largely deprioritized Mapmaker for I think reasons that I hope are obvious to the community. Like, the game was lacking in a lot of areas. We had to take like a hard right turn and say, like, are we investing in the right things? And when we were looking at that list, like Mapmaker was a very obvious one where it's like nobody's using this. Like, we're investing a lot of UI time in it. We're investing a lot of like design time in this. Like, is this really what we need to be focusing on right now? And the answer was a resounding no. So, I would love to eventually go back to that, that really awesome idea of like, people making their own maps and sort of sharing them and playing them. It's, like I said in the previous dev stream for PvE, like, having custom content in the game is extremely powerful. We know that, but we only have limited resources to work with. So when we look at sort of the priorities of our game and where we need to be investing, based on like what players are actually looking for, like it's very hard for us to justify it to ourselves to put more effort into Mapmaker. To get a little more specific to your point about Horde, one of the things we discovered quite quickly when we were making the Horde on tile maps was that a lot of the tiles weren't properly configured for Horde. So we were getting a lot of bugs around different types, getting stuck in walls, different things spawning incorrectly, bosses spawning in places they shouldn't be spawning, Jack clipping through walls, getting out of environment, stuff like that. If we were to do like what we've done for the Horde on tile maps, we spot fix the tiles that were part of those maps. But if we were to open up the map maker for everybody for Horde, we would have to go through every tile in the game and spend a lot of design time fixing those tiles to work with all the different enemy types and Jack and all these things. And that's time that's taking away from new multiplayer maps. That's taking time away from all sorts of multiplayer versus and some PvE stuff that we think players would prefer to see. So it's, for us, it's sort of weighing the the time we have, really, and like the resources that we have, and sort of making a decision on like what we want to invest in, and it's difficult to justify mapping.
Sure, good point.
All right, so I've got a question that I want to direct at Dana first, and then have Michael go, and that is, if you could snap your fingers right now and make some changes to PvE in general, like no cost to the company, no time to the company, if you could just make the changes instantly, what would you like to see happen?
My response is largely going to be driven by the feedback that I get
Right.
from you guys. And I think for me, it would be to bring back those legacy moments, whether it's legacy weapons or legacy characters. Mostly because I think like I know that there's an emotional connection to the previous Gears games that is strong, and I think it's important for us to recognize that. And I think we've done some really great things around knowing what those little moments are, and like just our tease for the Farmer Dom by just putting out like the tomatoes on the weekend, just as a little thing. Like the more we can think about that is just like little nuggets about that, showing that we actually know the game and are fans of the game, and so on and so forth. So for me, I hear all the time whenever we talk about PvE, the number one thing that comes up is people saying, why can't we have this character? Why can't I have this weapon? The weapons I'm less enthusiastic about, because I think the characters are more interesting. Like, I mean, everyone's like, what about a Hammer of Dawn? I'm like, that's cool, that's fine. But I feel like we've got a pretty good, healthy mix of weapons, but I think having new bad guys come in would be the thing that if there was no parameters and I could be like, snap my fingers, that's what I'd like to see.
And Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I have a couple things. They're gonna be pretty wild, so buckle up. So I would have loved to see Escape to be procedural instead of handcrafted maps.
That'd be cool.
We actually prototyped that quite a bit in the early stages, but we ultimately scrapped it.
Is that because of leaderboards and timing?
It's difficult for me to say. Like it was very, very early in the project, but so sort of a Warframe style where like you go in, like there's a tile set, but you never play it. It's never the same twice. Like
Right.
It's always like a different layout, different connections, different flanks, different fights. I would have loved to see that because what you see right now in the game is we've made like 30, 40 hives. We've tried to make unique challenges in all of them. But what you see is people just play the easiest ones, right? And like I don't blame them for that because like that's the best way to progress and gain progression. But you see that people generally will gravitate towards the ones that are simpler to complete, and the ones that are really challenging, like they'll maybe play it once or twice, have like a lot of fun and an epic sort of victory there, and then they'll just sort of put it away and go back to the surge, right? So what I would have loved to see is if we had a procedural one, then you could play it and it would never be the same. It would be roughly the same difficulty every time you play, and then we could just feed more tiles into it, feed more rules into it, and it could get more and more sophisticated over time and make really, really cool maps, right? Making like the 30, 40 hives took a lot of time. It took a lot of development, a lot of time from our level designers that could have been spent on 5v5 maps. So that's why I would have loved to see a procedural escape. The other one is for the class system. I would have loved to see a more relaxed class system where perhaps instead of having classes, you just build your own class. Like you're just like, I want to be a rifle dude, and then you just sort of equip some rifle cards and you pick a rifle ultimate or something, and you just sort of build sort of your play style instead of sort of picking a class that's already been sort of where like sort of the gameplay loop's already been decided and you're just sort of leveling up to get to that gameplay loop. I would have loved to see a more relaxed one where you just sort of say like, I like playing Gears like X, and then you just build that class. I would have loved to see that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Are better than...
I thought that
like
I thought that you guys actually liked that defined class thing because it helped you balance things and like people wouldn't find some super overpowered thing.
My mindset on that is, it's my job to balance it. So make it the best you can for the players, and then I need to just do my job. Really, like just balance it. Period. I think that was a concern in the past. For me, I just my perspective is like, do what's best for the players and then just do it right.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of people have asked for that, so I mean, it doesn't sound like it's going to happen in Gears 5, but I know a lot of people have asked for that, so that would be cool. Sort of a different thing is the lobby for Horde, and that's the server browser and the pregame lobby. So to start with the server browser, is there anything you guys are looking at for making updates to that UI or what is shown in the server browser?
Well, I mean, like we did. So in Operation 4, it shows the game mode. And from what I understand, there was a few other details that were added. I don't think people noticed that because I guess previously there was only Horde. Like you could only play normal Horde, but we added the game mode column so you could see if the lobby was Horde or Horde Frenzy. And I assume that would extend to if in the future we put, like, say, special events in there, you'd be able to see that too. But could you give me some more details on, like, sort of what you're kind of looking for? Because from me, I don't see any major issues with the server browser. But I think
the biggest one is that people have asked for is classes. It's, hey, I want to play as Jack. I'm going to server browser. I can't see, here's 4 people in the lobby, and I can't tell.
I want to see, like, a preview of who's in the...
Yes.
Even if it's just like the class is all based on that ultimate, so just have that ultimate symbol or something like that. Like list out all 5
that could be really cool. I like that idea. That's neat. Like people kind of do that now with like the text.
Yeah.
But that sometimes isn't perfect. That's a cool idea.
I know the filter system. That's awesome that you guys have a filter. I don't know if this is a permanent bug or if it was a one-time glitch thing. My friend said that he filtered by ping and it sorted highest to lowest. So you guys might want to look at that because
there's I wouldn't be surprised if there were some bugs there.
Yeah.
What about? Yeah, I was going to say, what about? And since you're talking about UI, we're all kind of in the Horde UI now.
Yeah.
What are your current feelings on selecting cards? In its current state, is there any chance that could be reworked? Because it can get a little confusing when you have all your.
You go and hit A. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Where you hit A and then it brings it back instead of being able to go check like before. I'm not really sure what happened. Obviously, I'm not super well equipped to talk about like the UI side of things, but I understand that that's a more difficult user experience. So like maybe we could bring it up and maybe resolve that in a future update.
Yeah, I think it's not very user friendly for selecting your cards. You go in and currently you're selecting this particular card slot. I want to be this card. So you have to.
It's kind of weird because it doesn't actually do that when you take cards off. Like you can take as many cards off as you want, but then it doesn't work the other way around. Yeah. So maybe there's something we can do to make that better.
And the other, I think, big thing on the Horde pregame lobby UI is it doesn't show passive abilities or it shows passive abilities. It doesn't show perks anywhere, and that's a big part of characters. And so the example I gave is, I played Clayton in Horde for the first time like a week and a half ago, and I wasn't playing him because I didn't have him leveled up very well. But when I loaded into the game, I saw his perks. I was like, oh wow, I don't have him leveled up, but these perks are amazing.
Yeah. Okay, don't hold me to this, but I think we're fixing that in Ep.5.
Okay,
I think that's actually in.
Okay, that'd be nice. And then, Neon, I know one thing you've brought up is seeing.
Now I'm in trouble. I'm on the hook for that, Michael. Thanks.
I swear we made that change, but I don't have time to run over to the build and check.
Neon, you've brought up being able to see. I don't know how they would show this in the UI, but seeing what cards your teammates have in the UI would be nice.
Yeah. With the assumption of how things would work, of course, not being able to see how it is going to potentially be, my biggest fear is that you're going to have people that are newer to PvE, Horde in particular, it could even be Escape, and they're going to run cards, even though they have high level characters, they're going to run cards that are not effective and efficient. But this kind of is counteracted to what you were saying. I don't want to play with someone who's going to be running custom snub and some really bad cards on a particular map or a hive, for example. Is there any chances that we can at least kind of like see what people are going to be using?
So there's a little bit to talk about there. So yes, I want to do that.
I'm giving you the complicated ones.
So from like a teamwork point of view, yes, like it'd be awesome to like see the cards someone's using on your team. The one thing that I'm worried about is I don't want to add toxicity to the game. So you said I don't want to be with a teammate that's using custom snub on Keegan or whatever. Does that open up a door where someone can be toxic to that player? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves when we're making a decision like that. I think, giving players information is generally good, but we have to be very careful sometimes, especially in like a game mode that's so team oriented, where you don't want to open up opportunities where players can now like sort of vilify each other for making bad decisions, right? It's something that we think about quite a bit. But I do think in general it's a good idea, and I would love to see it.
Let's see, and then Neon, the other one that you've mentioned a lot is being able to see in match if you're within the proper distance of somebody. For like Marcus has his Living Legend activated, and I don't know if I'm actually getting the boost from that. Am I within range? And you've given the example of Destiny does a great job in the bottom left corner. Has the little timer.
The Division. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those type of games have good indicators of whether you're within a certain radius or if you're actually being affected by it, whether it's a square icon or a timer. You guys have done some great UI work with adding like health bars from 4 to 5, which was great to see, and then the damage numbers. But is there any potential that we could see it expanded upon to have more user information at your hands? Because like he said with the Living Legend, if I wasn't experienced with it enough and understand how the radius works, and if I was to go just stand in it, I may not know that I'm actually being affected by it, or I may think I'm in it, but I'm actually not. Is there any way that there could be something that pops up?
Are you looking for like, say, like I'm in that radius or I'm in cover with Marcus and then just an icon appears on screen?
It could be an icon. It could be any visual indicator that lets me know as the player, okay, you're being affected by this. And that's just some type of like maybe has Marcus's face or Marcus's ultimate ability or something like that.
Yeah, like
not
we
sure
currently
exactly
have
how it could work, but something like
you're doing 110% damage with your snub or something. That thing pops up from the top right of the screen to show what your damage modifier is or whatever, and have something up there with the Marcus logo to say show Living Legend. Or I actually really liked the way Destiny did it, where it was in the bottom left and it like actually full text said the name of the thing and had a countdown for how long it would work.
like we have some. So just to start, we are looking at that. I can't promise like when or if it's going to happen, but we are definitely looking at it. We have some challenges to overcome there because we just have so many, like compared to Destiny, where like maybe a class has like 2 or 3 things they got going. Like you can equip 5 skill cards. There's tons of skill cards that can affect other players around you. We have passives like Call Gear's new passive that affects players that are around them. So we need to make sure that if we did that, we did it in a way that didn't clutter the screen like crazy. We would need to be a bit clever about how we do it. Only show, the most relevant information at the right time. I think it is a problem. It's 100% a problem. And it's a problem I would really like to fix. And we're looking at it pretty seriously.
Yep. Just a little fun question I read here is, why doesn't Jack have emotes? Like doing flips or beeping or something?
I mean, like that's not really like a me question, but like I'd love to see it. I assume it's just animation time. It's just, but I think it'd be great to see in the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for stuff like that, again, that just comes down to prioritization. Where if we were to sit down and to have, if we're doing that, because if you figure the work that goes into doing an emote for Marcus or whomever, that applies to multiple areas of the game so that the benefit is spread across regardless of which mode you play. whereas it's the same amount of work to go and do something for Jack, but the benefit is only ever going to be felt.
No, that's a great point.
In PvE.
Yeah. And then
So it's not that it's not like we've said a gazillion times, right? Everything is possible. It's just like, where do we want to put the resources towards?
Right.
And doing it and doing one thing that's only going to benefit one part of the like. We're going to go if we're picking between two emotes and one can something everybody can enjoy and versus one that only one person can enjoy, it becomes a bit tricky. I mean, it'd be great because you can see it being a little like R2, right? Where it becomes like squeaks and things like that, and it becomes a real like it adds all of that fun personality that Jack had in the campaign to it. So I think it's a great idea. I think to me it's probably just a cost benefit.
Yeah, because everyone points out how weird it is that he's literally the only character that doesn't have expressions.
Yeah. No. He is a robot.
Yeah.
Gives you.
That's not his fault.
This might.
Oh, thanks, Del.
Oh, great. I have thunderstorms coming in, so you guys might hear some thunder.
All right. Well, in case he gets disconnected, are you okay connection-wise right now and everything?
Yeah, I should be fine.
Okay, good. So, Dana, I don't know if you saw, I tweeted out a little bit ago, probably about last week or so, that I was just looking on the Gears 5 website, and I went to Lonnie's page, and I was like, let me just go look at her page, and I saw the Electro Blade, which is the ultimate ability for Lonnie, and I right-clicked it, and I was like, oh, it's called Shocking Aggression. Is there any reasons why things, I mean, just insight. It's fun to know the back history of why things are the way they are compared to what they were. It appears to me that it was probably originally called Shocking Aggression before Electroblade. Is there reasons or why or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, Carl, who is on our web team, who's amazing, he responded to you, and I was like, "Oh, thanks, Carl." So it was great that. Yeah, I know. I was like, "Oh, Carl, doing my job, thanks," because it was great. I was gonna have to ask him anyway, so it was perfect. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what ends up happening is when, and it's actually the bane of my existence, is there are dev names inside of the game. I'm trying to think of a current map that would have been named something. What was Pahanu called before it was Pahanu?
Wilds.
Wilds. So there's a good example. So if you actually go through the code of the game and all sorts of stuff like that, it's actually it's Wilds is in there. And maps, it's not too bad because there's not too many of them. But when it moves into weapon skins or moves into abilities or things like that, it becomes tricky. So there's a lot of times where you like I have to go and be like, hey, is this actually what it's supposed to be? And so it just becomes something where usually a name like Wilds versus Bahanu is a really good example. You know, Wilds is a generic name that talks just about sort of like a outside environment, right? And then we wanted to go and give it a little bit of flavor, so it actually had some context in the lore of Gears of War. And then, so for us, when we go down that path, that's largely why that's the case. Like I said, I hate it because it just results in sometimes mistakes from being made on my part. But it totally makes sense. So I don't think there's a better answer other than that's the truth.
Yeah, I can give some extra context if you want. Yeah, Shocking Aggression is the dev name for Lonnie's Ultimate. And usually how that happens is we build the Ultimate, we give it it needs to have a name and code so that the game knows what it is, right? But then when we're finishing up, we say like, okay, do we want to rename this to something that's a bit nicer that's a better player-facing name that's more relevant? So yeah, there's a few of those. Like Marcus's is like Auto Headshot Barrage, which obviously is a mouthful. You would never want to have that on the game. Right? So, yeah, it's just dev names.
Yeah, and it's been like that for we can go in the back end tool, like back into Gears 4, and it's the same thing. And I've worked on I don't even know how many games. It's all like that. So. What a lot of times that the savvier designers do is pick names that are deliberately that don't work, so that they don't, because sometimes they just flow through because people can't think of it's not a great name, it's just a better name than anybody else can think. So if you pick kind of a crappy name at the beginning, it forces you to pick a better name at the end.
What's actually kind of funny is a lot of the maps, the development name is different from the name that you guys see in the actual game, and it's out. I always find it very interesting to see like which maps retain their name. I think I have the best record. Many of my maps have retained their development name.
Who comes up with that name?
We're preparing. Yeah, we're preparing for Operation 5 right now, like the marketing side of it all. And there was a map that's coming that had just been in in a lot of sort of briefs and marketing collateral as X. And then I was just confirming something with Michael. He was like, "Oh, by the way, it's not called that anymore." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." So it's it's interesting.
That was a self-inflicted wound. I decided to change it to be more lore-friendly. But if you can believe it, like All Father's Arena survived. That was its original development name, and they were just like All Father's Arena. That sounds sweet, and they just like took it and ran with it. And like even like Reclaimed and Basgar.
Who comes up with the names originally? Like if you were designing a map, Michael, would it be you, or is it just the map team in general?
It's just when we save the first cut of the map, we just name it something, and usually we have an idea of what we want it to be. It's actually kind of funny. The development name for Exhibit was actually MP_New Hope, because I wanted to make a map based on the New Hope facility because we were going there in Gears 5. And when we got time to do the art for the map, they were like, "Oh, like the New Hope set isn't ready yet, but we have this cool like library set." So then they changed it to a museum. And I was a bit bummed because I was like, "Oh, I want a cool Niles map," but like, sometimes that sort of thing happens, right? And we have to switch the name. So
hey, but you got a cool Easter egg out of it.
Yeah.
All right. So, a big thing that I always bring up, you say this isn't going to change in Gears 5, but I want to hear what your thoughts are on the difficulty selection and modifiers and how those are linked together.
This is like your personal vendetta on this one, Chap.
This is.
I feel like you've been talking about this since the game came out.
I have, and it's just something that I really disagree with the way that it was done.
So yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. So there are pros and cons to it for sure. One of the things that I did like about it quite a bit was that it gave us a way to add difficulty to the game that wasn't just adding more health and adding more damage, right? Like that's a big criticism, especially of us. It's like, oh well, you just make it harder by adding more health and damage, and mutators was a way for us to sort of go in a bit of a different direction where we add different challenges on top of slight increases of health and damage, but when you get to like the highest level, it's not so spongy that the game just isn't fun anymore, right? Like you're dealing with things like enemies regenerating health like you do, and in Escape you're dealing with things like enemies using your ultimate against you and stuff like that. And it gave us a really interesting avenue as designers to create challenges that were outside of just the bounds of the geometry of the map, right? So in that way I found it a very positive thing for the game, but like you say, like it can also be very restrictive where if you're a sort of player that wants to craft a unique experience for yourself, you can't really do that. So because the difficulty mutator system is just so entrenched in our game, like I can't see it changing for Gears 5. But what we're going to try to do is find more interesting ways to use mutators to try to make up for that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the mutators are a great thing. My sticking point is just the Gears 3 wave was almost perfect, where they had the mutators to make those adjustments, but it wasn't tied to your difficulty, so it allowed you to do those easy mutators or the hard ones.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We also have an additional problem, which is like in Gears 3, you didn't really have a progression to PvE. Like obviously you had like your account level and stuff, but we have a problem now where you're playing Horde to progress a character, right? And if you have freedom with mutators, like do people just build easy experiences to like? And obviously we could do some balancing to make that work, but to make that feel good to the player in a way that feels intuitive and fair, would be quite a lot of work.
Yeah, because because no mutator is equal, right? Like you guys have your different the way you guys have it. It's almost like every mutator is treated equally in terms of it adding difficulty.
Yeah.
In Gears 3, it was, all right, this thing makes your score 25% higher. This one makes your score 15% higher. This one makes your score 50% lower.
And they go down, yeah.
Yeah. So
we would probably have to do something like that. The way that it works right now is any mutator like slightly increases the difficulty under the hood. I'm sure you guys have noticed that. Like, you know, it doesn't just add a mutator; it also like kind of bumps the difficulty.
Is there a way to make that more apparent? Because I've talked to a lot of people who don't know that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like I would love to make that a little more transparent. It is it is something that could be communicated much better to people that sort of are asking like, well, why does it do that? Well, it'd be really obvious if you didn't have it in. The mutators can't carry the full weight of difficulty. Like you do need some increases in damage and health, or otherwise, you know, it's just not possible to increase difficulty in a way that feels good. So, but making that more transparent is something that I think would be really good for the game.
Well, speaking of mutators, though, in Gears 3, I don't recall it being done in 5 or even 4. Correct me if I'm wrong. Memory could be going bad here. But is there a way to like do like the fun mutators? Like if you don't want to have a serious gameplay in Horde, you just want to log in, just play with your friends and do whatever. It's not like you're trying to be super competitive and you want to do something silly like big heads or something like that. Is that even a possibility to do?
Yep. I actually added the first positive mutator to the game a couple weeks ago. So we're experimenting with them. We want to do them. I'm trying to find a way to sort of make them work within the framework that we have today that's compelling and feels good. So expect to see some of that in the future.
Would that type of thing disable achievements or progress or whatever? Or are you trying to find a way to balance it so that you can have the
I don't want to go too much into what exactly we're doing, but the idea is that it wouldn't.
Okay, that'd be nice. And then, so I guess mutators kind of almost goes into events. So far in Operation 4, the Horde events that we've seen are basically the tile-based maps, which are really cool. But I know a lot of people have been looking for that new experience in terms of not the environment, but the actual enemies that you're facing or different modifiers like that. Are there plans for Operation 4 to actually have Horde events?
Yeah, so Horde events, when I first came on, it was very obvious that we were not doing them well. You know, we had events for like say Halloween and the holidays and the Terminator one, but when it came to sort of like events that were just happening, like just to spice up the operation, like those were just not happening. I learned very quickly it takes a lot of work to do an event. They sort of have to be planned out and implemented way early, like way in advance of the actual time that the event happens. So we have a bunch in the oven right now, and we want to do some awesome, cool events, and we have a lot of awesome, cool events that we're really excited about, but it takes time. And that's something that I learned the hard way. So we're working on them. They're coming, and I think you guys are going to like them.
When they come...
they have to flow through the QA process. Just as a heads up, so there's multiple steps in there. So someone like Michael has to go and concept and design the event, and then has to then be submitted. It has to be then kind of created, and then QA has to go and make sure that it works. So it's tricky. Like as Michael was saying, that rolling out an event isn't just something as simple as let's go and do X. Then it becomes like, okay, well, if we go and do X, and then the QA process, keep in mind, is like you have to then go and QA it on every map. Like it's not just something as simple as like, oh, unless you make it, it's only going to be on Vaskar. But if that's the event. But if you're going through and you want to go and roll it down, it becomes pretty substantive on how to add anything to the game. But certainly a Horde event is part of that. And then you have to balance QA resources with all the other stuff.
So speaking of making it available on all of the maps, Cheesecode in chat mentioned, can we have him in custom lobbies? Like if Juvie Madness comes as an event, would you plan on having that in custom lobbies as well?
What I would probably do is, put them in custom after, probably like a while after the event actually runs. Because what happens if you just put it in custom is you sort of dilute the event itself. If you just have it in custom, like running it again isn't going to make anyone excited because they've been able to play it in custom the entire time, right? So why would you get excited to play Jingle Juvies again if you had the opportunity to play it all year? But I do like the idea of sort of, I think this is what happened in Gears 4 is sort of when a few years had passed, the event sort of made their way into custom. I think that's a really cool idea, but we would probably want to keep them out of custom at least for a little while so that we could actually use them to make events that people feel like, hey, I want to play that. I want to come and log in to play that. And you can only play it for that time, right?
So if that happens, I would highly recommend changing the matchmaking to have Master as the highest option instead of Inconceivable, because I know a lot of people want to play on Master, but if they matchmake, they can't do that.
That's a very good point. Is that does prevent us from playing Master on special events, and that's something we're going to have to account for. But just a side note, unless you're bringing like a full stack into matchmaking for Master, like that's a pretty bad experience. Like randoms coming into Master is difficult to make that sort of a good experience, especially if there's no communication going on. So we find that generally removing it from matchmaking has been a good thing, but that is a really good point about special events.
Yeah. Let's see. So I wanted to talk about classes a little bit. I know we have the big decoupling of classes and characters coming in the future. Neon, you said you weren't too clear on what that was, right? Or
I'm just curious of how it's going to look, but some of it's been answered a little bit briefly. I mean, I know they can't go into certain details, so we'll see more. But I guess this is something that I can say. It like you kind of said earlier, it does appear that the classes that we have now are going to be maybe assigned based off their ultimate ability with the whether it was intentional or not, the new cards that have come out, where they're more of a generic Carmine or Cog Gear on it. I think that was my biggest thing is trying to understand is if we're going to decouple it, and then is it going to be like still this class is this class and these cards are still assigned to it, or is it just going to be a big stockpile of cards and then you pick whatever you want? And that's the confusion I think that, assuming it's the way it looks today, then it's fine. It's understandable because you still know who that class is as long as there's an indicator based off the ultimate ability.
Yeah,
I guess that's where I'm trying to go with that.
Michael, maybe I'll just take this one real quick, just to save you from going into many details. We're going to go into a lot of that in advance of Op.5 on what the specifics are. But as Michael has said in the past, if you think of whoever the class is right now, everything that's associated with that class will stay together. So there won't be that kind of mixing and matching and picking as you choose as you go along.
So if I have a level 15 Kate right now, in the future, I will still have, always use Camo Scout as the example. It's a class called Camo Scout or whatever it will be called that has that same passive, ultimate, cards, perks, and everything. And it's still level 15. The only difference is I can choose any character I want.
Yeah, you can play that as Del.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask one more question about that. I know that you're being vague, and I agree and 100% understand it. So right now in the game, if you were to go into Kate's classes, you can see her skill cards. Before it used, if I remember correctly, before the name of the skill card, it used to say like Kate skill. Now that's been removed, but when you finish we'll just say a match, whether it's Horde or Escape, it will say Kate skill, and then it will still say that. Is that type of language going to be removed? So it doesn't say Kate skill, or is it going to say Scout class, or is it still going to say Kate skill?
It'll be set up in a way that makes sense and is logical, so people, as they play it, it'll be fine.
Okay.
Sorry, Michael. I know that you probably want to answer that a lot better than I could, but I'm just going to kind of nip it in the bud there.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I think the way that you answered it was pretty clear. I'm not really sure like where the confusion is. Like it's
Yeah.
pretty clear what I think is
As
happening.
long as there's just clear ways to understand, that's what it is. Because right
Like
now, it's
like I've heard a lot of questions about like, oh, like what are you going to do with this text, and like what are you going to do with this text, and like the answer is simply we're going to fix it. Like it's not going to say like the character name, like we're going to fix it.
Yeah. And so on the
So you're
previous PvE stream, Michael, I think you alluded to that you could have duplicate. You're thinking about allowing duplicate classes in the future.
Yeah, so we're experimenting with that right now.
Okay, so that's not something you guys have finalized. You're just experimenting with that.
Yeah, we're experimenting with that.
Okay. Well, what kind of like challenges have you run into?
Well, mostly like the stuff that you would probably assume. We would run into like a lot of balance challenges around bringing multiple classes in, especially multiple powerful classes. So there's been some work there to sort of look at sort of how do you give players freedom to use any class they want without breaking the experience, and that's sort of been the main challenge.
And then this is another one that I'm not sure if you guys are really able to hit on, but the promotional characters. Are you able to talk about what's going on with those once the stuff becomes decoupled? Like, I don't own Grace right now, for example. In the future, will I still not own Grace, but I will be able to play as her class? Or is it when you buy that, you buy the class and you buy the...
I don't know, Dana, do you want us to go into that, or...
Oh,
I know
we'll
a lot of
cover
people
that,
ask about Halo and
no, I
and
know,
characters
and
for that.
and the reason why I'm a little hesitant is not that we don't want to share. It's just, Mike, with questions like this, like answering one question results in another question that needs to be asked, and then another question that wants to be asked, and then another question wants to be asked. And I don't want to get into a scenario where, like, we're kind of giving half answers that potentially can cause more frustration. I think in the end, Michael put it eloquently before, where these are things that we're looking at. Michael and the team, like Michael especially, plays the hell out of this mode, and is certainly, if you're thinking of these things are things that are being thought of, and those will be addressed as we get closer to Ep.5.
Yeah.
Not trying to be rude. It's one of those ones where it's a ball, like it just gets tricky, and that's all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull the future content card on that one.
Well, what about this then? Since we're talking about characters and skill cards, is there any idea or any thought process of trying to? Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and ask this question. So you have the bleeding damage. You now have burning damage. Is there any way to combine the effects where the character has or an enemy has bleeding and also damage or fire damage on them? Is there any way to have like an astronomical type of damage multiplier or a modifier on it where they kind of synergize together or something of the lines? Is that too complicated to do with the tools that you guys have now? Is it something that you have looked into where they synergize nice together?
Well, from what I understand in the game, those effects would happen at the same time, and you would be doing more damage. But are you asking, like, if there was a special...
If you were to...
effect that happens only when you combine two effects on an enemy?
Yeah, like a combo of some kind. Like, if you apply the bleed with the melee, for example, then you have Cole come and charge them, then, you get some type of, I don't know. I mean, because right now it's just a static bleed and then a static burn. Is there anything else that has been explored or even thought about?
I can't say that we have, but I think it's a really neat idea. Like, you see that kind of similar gameplay, and I'm going to throw out a really weird example, like Divinity Original Sin 2, where like you can like do cursed versions of different elemental effects and like blessed versions of different elemental effects. Now, obviously, that's way crazy for Gears of War, but I think that's sort of in the same vein that you're talking about, where there's sort of like this combining effect, which it's interesting to think about. The one thing I would say is that those status effects are already quite strong. So we would need to make sure that what we're doing doesn't break the game. But given that it requires a lot of teamwork and coordination to do that, it could be really cool to reward players for that moment.
I saw someone in chat asking about Jack in decoupled classes.
I was going to just ask.
He's not getting decoupled, right? So he's not getting decoupled, right? Jack is remaining Jack.
Like that's sort of in the same vein as like Neon's question about the text. Like, we're gonna fix it. It's gonna make sense.
All right. Well,
walking around as Marcus sapping things.
Yeah. Well, so I was actually going to ask, like, internally when testing, have you guys like had an experience where?
Oh, are you asking like, did someone ever spawn in as the Jack class as a human?
Yeah. Did Baird fly around the map Superman style?
What the actual answer to what that looks like in the game in bug form is a little more boring than Baird flying around with a little zapper. You just spawn in with no gun. So
I really wanted him to just like Sith Lord lightning fingers down at people flying around.
Oh, because all that stuff's built into Jack, right?
Yeah.
So if you spawn in as a human character with that class, like you're not actually, the zapper isn't part of the class. It's actually part of Jack. So if you don't spawn in as the Jack character, you're not getting.
Yeah. Someone asked.
It's kind of fun to think about those. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I was changing topic a little bit here.
I was just gonna say, it's kind of funny though if you think about it. When I think it was during the Unreal Engine presentation a couple weeks back, where they were talking a little bit about Series X, and then I can't remember his name, had that little fun video of the Gears 5 trailer, but with the Swarm acting like Marcus and Kate, right? That's kind of funny to see that, like little fun things like that are fun to look at. Before you switch gears, I wanted to ask Michael, where do you get your inspiration from for like the modifiers and the mutators and potential class development? Where do you find that inspiration? I think you mentioned Divinity, which is interesting enough, but is there any other sources that you find that from? Do you
are you speaking like broadly about like all PvE design, or are you speaking
anything
mutators?
Just what goes through your mind, like when you're like, oh, that's actually a cool idea. I wonder if we can implement that in Gears.
Well, it's a little difficult to answer that so broadly when it kind of encapsulates like difficulty modifiers and class stuff. But we do look at things that seem mechanically interesting and fun in different games, and think about what is the Gearsy version of that look like, or how can we get something like a new mechanic that's never been in Gears before to sort of work in Gears. And you see that a lot with like Gears has never done like status effects before, and we brought that into Gears 5. And so yeah, like very broadly speaking, yes, we do look at different games for inspiration. If you wanted like more specific examples, we would have to talk more about the specific content, but yeah, like we do look to other sources of media.
At the same time, I just wanted to be broad with it, so that's perfect.
Like if you want to talk about, oh sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Like if for like mutators, for example, we do look at sort of the way that games like Halo and Destiny do mutators. We do also take inspiration from some of our own things. Like, for example, we have ultimates that use the actual ultimate abilities that you have access to then against you. So we have like Mac Shield and some enemies that use Clayton's ultimate when they hit a certain health threshold. And the reason why we like to do that is because that's already readable to the player. They already understand how it works. So when they see that effect happening on the enemy, they're like, "Oh, I get it. That's Clayton's ultimate," or "I get it. That's the shield." So then they sort of already have a point of reference for, how that mechanic works. So that works really nice for us. Yeah.
Someone was asking about bosses. So Gears 4 introduced mini bosses, and then Gears 5 introduced mini bosses, and then there were a couple new bosses that were added, but it's not a huge number of new ones. In the past, I think you said that you guys were dabbling with possibly trying to add new ones, but the main thing I want to know about is the balancing. Right now, like the matriarchs seem crazy overpowered compared to the other bosses. And are you doing anything with bosses to try and make them feel a little bit more equal?
Yeah, so we're looking at that all the time. So I've been looking a little bit at the matriarch and what we can do to kind of reward players a bit better. It is difficult to hit that spot, that weak spot on the matriarch. So making sure that when you are hitting that, you feel like you're getting an appropriate response is something that I've been looking at. Also, looking at making sure that the counters feel good. Like for example, the classic counter to the matriarch based on campaign is the ice cannon. We've been looking at seeing if there need to be changes there to make it so that that's a more obvious tactic to use against the matriarch and horde. It might be a little too difficult to use at the moment. There are bosses that are on the flip side that we want to see what we can do to make them feel like either they're in the most appropriate group or they have an appropriate level of challenge. For me, one of the big ones is the carrier. Kind of feels a bit more like a mini boss than a boss to me.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, do we want to move that to the mini boss category, or do we want to, change some of the values on the carrier to make it a bit more of a boss? So yeah, like there's always things that we're looking at for the bosses.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me at the matriarch is the fact that it can basically one-hit your fortifications, and it can't be damaged from the front. What's that?
Yeah, I can't hear my.
Yes, you did. He's froze. Oh, stream is now. Okay, he's back.
Are we back?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're back.
Okay.
Yeah, you just a second there.
Yeah, it looks like we had a few drop frames there. All right. Yeah, for me, the main thing with with the matriarch was the fact that it's an enemy that can basically one-shot most of your fortifications, and it's not damageable from the front. So the fact that it can just be approaching your base, and there's nothing you can do about that except for leave your base, and it's the only boss that's like that. Seems
like
odd.
For me, when I'm thinking about it logically, I'm like, okay, if I want to stop this thing from getting into my base and just one-hitting all my fortifications, like what can I do right now that doesn't involve actually killing it? And for me, that answer is the ice cannon. But right now, I think the freeze rate is just a little too low, so you just can't freeze it in time to actually get sort of to stop it from causing a lot of damage. So that's one area that we're looking at to see if we can make that feel a little better, so that you don't necessarily have to have a Clayton with flash freeze on. Like you should be able to just run to the fabricator, buy the ice cannon, and just make it work.
Yeah. Let's see.
So speaking of that though, Dana, this is going to go towards Dana since he works with the marketing team. Is there any thoughts or processes maybe that you guys have picked around to potentially do like a teach and learn, whether it's through informal videos or educational videos of how to play as certain characters or classes from the community or internally, and why they are the way they are? There's definitely good indications in the game based off their descriptions of who they are and the kind of their classes. But if I was a new player coming in, I may not even know or understand what this is all about. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of the things that, and even inside the studio, I think there's a recognition that player education is something, we were really excited about boot camp and adding that as a way to have players understand gears a little bit better that were coming in. But it falls short a little bit. Like it doesn't teach advanced mechanics very well in terms of, I'll use not like wall bouncing, but actually wall bounce is a good example. And this doesn't answer your question, but I'm going to get to there in a second. Is, some players look at wall bouncing as a glitch rather than as an actual technique, right? So we want to be able to educate players that someone isn't cheating if they see someone going and doing something. Now, in terms of educating people on classes and stuff like that, that's really, really hard. Our creative services team is not ginormous, but they're always really busy getting a lot of stuff done, supporting all of that. I think the easiest way to do that, and maybe I'm going to put the onus onto you guys and to other people, is I would love it if the community was able to go and make those videos I would love to showcase those communities on our channels and promote and give love to someone that did that work. So if you guys were to, for example, go and do that, and you were like, hey, this is part 1 of an 18-part series of where we're going to go through and talk about each class and blah, 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 blah. And I think, to me, those are ones that I'm like, that's great. And if they feel valuable and they feel valid, then those would be stuff that, I would be more than happy to share on our social channels, as well as potentially even host on our YouTube channels, right? So I think those are ones that, as much as I would love for that to happen, and I look at how much work that needs to be done, or I look at the amount of assets that are being created, and what the team is responsible for, because I get other people come to me and are like, hey, you guys did a really great job at creating marketing assets every time you added a new character to the game in Gears 4. I wish you guys would do more things like that. Or, like whatever it is. So everybody kind of has their perspective of things that are important to them. And I don't think one is necessarily more like valuable than the other. We're trying to do as much as we can with the resources that we have. But for this, I think those are great. And I wish there were those resources out there, or I'm sure there are. But if those, I would happily share those resources if somebody were to go and make those. So if you're out there and you've made those videos, let me know, and I'll have a look at them. No, I know you did, right? So I think for me is if we feel like that's a thing, and because I feel like Horde is very interesting, and even Escape, but Horde more so. But I think they're both very interesting, but Horde can feel a little daunting at first, I think, because of the time commitment, because of the highly the team-based gameplay. So if you're kind of going in as a rando with not a lot of high-level skill players, you kind of want to have somebody that knows the mode to kind of hold your hand along a little bit, to be like, hey, you're starting out, maybe you should start as playing as this character, and then figure that out, because this is a good way to feel powerful and to have fun. And then, don't bother starting with this character first, because it's great until you know the mode and you hit level 9, or just kind of making it up or whatever it is. So if and like I said, I'm sure there's those assets out there. I saw somebody just flagged someone called Hulk Daddy in the forums and stuff like that. So I would, like I said, I'd like to watch them, and I rely on Michael Shannon to be a little bit of a quality control to make sure that it's being presented the right way. But to me, I think those are helpful, because I think Horde is a lot of fun, and I think Escape is a lot of fun, and I think if people, the more they the more it makes it easier to kind of get into that and be comfortable and confident to jump in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty. Well, I think that goes through most of that list of questions that I had. I know I lost some of my questions, but Neon, do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up before we start to wrap up here?
I
don't think there's much.
Yeah, I want to say thanks. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks
I know
for
that,
joining.
It's great for us to be able to have. I know that these dialogue-oriented ones are a little bit easier than the dev streams, where there's follow-up questions, and there's times we get asked stuff, and we make an assumption based on what's in the chat, and because of the way the chat works, sometimes it's hard to get that follow-up one, or things get missed. So this is great. So thank you, and thank you, Michael, for taking time out of your day.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Chaps and Neon. I love talking to you guys. It's awesome to hear you guys' passion for the game, and it's been great to have a chance to be here with you guys.
Yeah, and really just thank you for joining. I know fans have really wanted to hear the answers to a lot of these questions, so it was nice to get these asked, and Dana, like you said, to actually have the follow-up with it and be able to continue that discussion.
And we'll come on again, and maybe we'll do a PvP one or something like that. So these are great.
Yeah, I know I have a
Dana
of PvP questions.
PvP, PvE.
Yes, yeah. So give us a little bit. I'd like for PvP, we can wait a little bit. Let's get ranked in there, and we have a few bugs that we're working on. So I think if we're going to have a conversation, I'd like to get us kind of where we are right now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And I do want to plug our Trello board. So it's being updated on a regular basis. So make sure that if you guys are watching this, you do have questions, stop by there and keep an eye out for that, because it is a great way to stay informed on stuff that we're aware of and are working on.
And for anyone watching on YouTube, I will have that link down in the description, along with the channels that you can find all these fine people at. So thank you for watching. If you're watching live, we'll see you guys later. And for anyone watching on YouTube, thanks for watching there as well. See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.